Hey everyone, welcome back to Dre's Crime Chronicles. I have to warn you, today's case is one of those that leaves a mark. We're diving into the story of Colby Martin, a man who decided to take the life of Melody Rohrer, a 64-year-old grandmother, in one of the most brutal ways possible. This isn't just a story you just shrug off, it's the kind that sticks with you, and I think you'll see why. This case is as senseless as it is dark. And I have to say, as I read about what Colby did, I couldn't help but shake my head. This guy's actions will leave you wondering what went so wrong in his head. Buckle up, because this one's going to take us through some seriously dark and disturbing territory. So, to really understand the weight of this story, let's start by talking about who Melody was. Melody Rohrer was a 64-year-old grandmother. But she wasn't your typical sit in the rocking chair and knit kind of grandma. Melody was active, vibrant, and full of life. This was a woman who loved her daily walks, no matter rain or shine, enjoying every minute of being out in nature. Imagine her, walking through her neighborhood, waving at folks she knew, making small talk, probably with a smile that would make anyone's day. That was Melody. Melody had a big family. Kids, grandkids, people who loved her and counted on her to be there. She was also a retired elementary school teacher, and you know those teachers. They leave an impact on everyone they meet. I bet you can still remember the teachers who made you feel seen and supported. That was Melody. For countless kids. Kids who grew up and still remember her. She was the kind of teacher who didn't just go through the motions. She connected with her students, and after she retired, she kept up that same spirit, staying involved with her community and bringing her warmth wherever she went. So to say Melody was loved is a complete understatement. She was a fixture in her community, the kind of person who made the world a better place just by being in it. Her daily walks were part of her routine, a chance for her to enjoy some peace and connect with the people around her. But on September 20th, 2021, what should have been a regular peaceful day would turn into the last day of her life. So now we have to jump in and talk about Colby Martin. This guy had a backstory that's as messy as it gets. And I don't mean in a way that makes you feel sorry for him. Colby grew up in a chaotic environment, bouncing around from home to home with parents who weren't exactly nurturing. By all accounts, his family life was fractured. He wasn't getting the support, guidance, or stability that kids need to grow up healthy. And somewhere along the way, Colby seemed to lose any connection to empathy or humanity. Now, from a young age, he was described as a loner, but not in that quiet, introverted way. This was the kind of loner who gave people the creeps. He didn't make friends easily, and people who knew him growing up would say that he was something a little bit off about him. Colby was known to be quick to anger, withdrawn, and he had this bit of a making people uncomfortable vibe. Like he didn't quite understand how to be around others. And as he got older, the anger and isolation didn't go away. Instead, they seemed to fester. He drifted from one job to another, never holding anything down for long, and he rarely kept in touch with anyone. So by his late 20s, Colby was living a bleak, lonely existence. No real job, no meaningful relationships, just a lot of resentment towards the world. If you were to look at his life from the outside, it would seem like he was just floating, completely disconnected from everything and everyone. People who encountered him described him as cold, distant, and just playing off. You know how you sometimes get a bad vibe from someone? Colby was definitely that bad vibe. He was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and on that September day, he finally did. So, it's September 20th, 2021. Melody is out for her usual walk along a rural road in Van Buren County, Michigan. This was her routine, a little time to herself to enjoy the fresh air, the birds, the quiet. She wasn't doing anything unusual, just minding her own business, enjoying her day, but unfortunately, Colby Martin was out that day as well, aimlessly driving around. He wasn't out for a drive to clear his head or enjoy the scenery. This was a man with a lot of pent-up anger and no direction in life. And he was looking for something, or maybe someone, to take that anger out on. As he is driving, he spotted Melody on her walk, and for reasons we'll never fully understand, he zeroed in on her. According to witnesses, this wasn't an accident. Colby actually aimed his pickup truck right at her. It wasn't a last minute swerve or a moment of inattention. He targeted her. He sped up, and before Melody could react, he hit her with the truck, sending her flying to the ground. But as horrific as that sounds, it was only the beginning of what Colby had planned. And instead of stopping to help her or even fleeing the scene, Colby got out of the truck, walked over to where Melody was laying, and in a chilling move, picked her up and put her in the passenger seat of his truck. Imagine the horror Melody must have felt in that moment. Hurt, disoriented, looking into the face of a man who just hit her, realizing that he wasn't there to help. Colby made a decision, and whatever humanity he may have once had was nowhere to be found. Now, here's where things get even darker. After putting Melody in his truck, Colby didn't take her to the hospital or anywhere she could get help. No, he drove her out of Van Buren County, taking her miles away to a remote wooded area in St. Joseph's County. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. He drove her for miles, which each turn taking her further from anyone who could possibly help. And when he finally arrived at his isolated hidden spot, he did the unthinkable. Colby didn't just kill Melody, he violated her. In that secluded area, he sexually assaulted her. Imagine the absolute horror Melody must have experienced. Here was a woman who had done absolutely nothing wrong, who had lived her life with kindness, being subject to unimaginable cruelty. And after the assault, Colby took things even further. He looked into her eyes and strangled her, taking her life with his own hands. It takes a special kind of cruelty to do something like that. To look someone directly in their eyes and end their life with no remorse, no empathy, absolutely nothing. And as if this wasn't enough, after all of that, he left her body there, hidden among the trees like she was trash. Melody, who was loved by so many, was discarded by Colby as if she was nothing. He left her in a dark, lonely spot, walked back to his truck, and drove away without a second thought. The level of disregard he showed for her life is something I can barely comprehend. Colby didn't just kill Melody. He desecrated her memory, treating her like she was nothing more than an object. Alright, so let's talk aftermath. So picture this. Melody's out there just taking her usual walk, and then she just disappears. Now, in a close-knit community like Van Buren County, this isn't something that goes unnoticed. Melody was the kind of person who had a ripple effect wherever she went. So when she didn't show up, people noticed. And when the news of her murder started spreading, well, you can bet the shock was instant. People were like, "What do you mean Melody's gone? She was just here. She was just smiling at us yesterday." I mean, imagine the disbelief. A woman like Melody doesn't just disappear, especially not in a way this dark, this violent. This community was absolutely rocked, and honestly, they had every right to be. Now, here's where things get interesting. When the police get the call about an abandoned truck out in the middle of nowhere, they know something's off. I mean, abandoned trucks don't just pop up in the middle of secluded forest with no reason, right? So the cops head out there, and boom, they find Colby's truck just sitting there, looking all kinds of suspicious. And nearby, hidden in the trees, they find Melody's body. Now, if you're a detective on that case, you're probably thinking, alright, we've got a real sicko on our hands here. And here's where the investigation really kicks into high gear. The first thing they do is track that truck back to Colby. You can just imagine the detectives sitting around their desk, scratching their heads and piecing things together like, who the heck is this guy? Why did he do this? Now, Colby didn't exactly cover his tracks very well. It's almost as if he'd never watched a single episode of CSI in his life. I mean, come on, Colby. A bit of a rookie move here, right? So they start pulling up every piece of evidence they can find. First, they get surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and public areas. And there it is in plain day. Colby's truck rolling through town, right around the time Melody went missing. If he thought he was going to be low key, he was sorely mistaken. Imagine his face if he had known he was being caught on every single camera in town. But the police don't stop there. They dig deeper, pulling his cell phone records, and guess what? It's like his phone was practically begging to spill the beans to them. Colby's cell phone was pinging all over the place that day, leaving a digital breadcrumb trail right to his guilt. His phone logs showed him at every major location, from where he first spotted Melody to the remote location where he was left. Seriously, the guy might as well have been live streaming his crime. It's like, hey Colby, do you know that in 2021 your phone is basically your snitch in your pocket? It's almost like he's never heard of modern technology. But the real kicker, the detectives didn't just stop at the cell phone pings and camera footage. They decided to give his truck the full CSI treatment. Imagine them combing over every inch, shining their little blue lights, dusting for prints, and surprise, surprise, the inside of the truck told the whole story. They found all the evidence they needed to show that Melody had been there against her will. There were signs of a struggle, physical evidence that pointed to just how much she fought back. Melody wasn't going down easy, that's for sure. And as the investigation kept unfolding, the community response was exactly what you would expect. Pure heartbreak, mixed with absolute outrage. Here was Melody, a woman everyone knew and everyone loved. And now she was gone, taken in the most horrific way possible. It wasn't just fear, it was anger. People were scared, sure, but they were also furious. I mean, imagine living in a small town where everyone knows everyone, and suddenly realizing there's someone like Colby just lurking around. It makes your skin crawl. So people rallied together to support Melody's family, holding vigils, leaving flowers, writing messages, all of it. And let's just say, if Colby thought he'd be forgotten, he had another thing coming. There were calls for justice, demands for the harshest possible punishment. This wasn't a community that was going to let this slide. They wanted him to pay, to face the full weight of what he'd done, and who could blame them? Alright, so let's get into the police interview. Picture this. The detectives have gathered all this evidence. They've got the cell phone pings, surveillance footage, physical evidence from the truck. I mean, they basically have Colby dead to rights. And now it's time for the big show. They bring him in for questioning. You'd think at this point Colby might realize he's in serious trouble, right? I mean, he's sitting there in the interrogation room with detectives just staring him down. Evidence is lined up against him. But no, the guy walks into that room like he's there for a job interview or something. So the detectives start with the basics, trying to get a read on him. Where were you on the day of September 20th, they ask. Colby, without missing a beat, gives them some vague answer, probably thinking he's playing it cool. But let's be real. Colby's as cool as a hot mess. He's in there acting detached, giving one-word answers, probably hoping they'll give up and send him on his way. But these detectives, oh, they are not about to let him slide. Now they start pressing him harder and harder, asking why his truck was seen on camera near Melody's last known location. Why is his phone pinged at every significant spot on that day? And you can imagine the detectives here, watching Colby's reaction closely, just waiting for him to crack. But Colby, he's about as expressive as a brick wall. He's giving them blank stare, as if he's not sure what day it is, let alone why he's there. So they shift tactics, probably thinking, alright, if he's going to sit there like a mannequin, let's make him uncomfortable. So they bring up the evidence they found in his truck, the physical signs of struggle, the marks left behind, all pointing to what he did to Melody. And here's where things get even darker. You'd expect most people, even the cold-hearted ones, to maybe flinch a little. But Colby, not a single flicker of emotion. Nothing, just a dead-eyed stare, like he's bored and he's just chilling. Finally, they ask him why he took her out to the woods, why he abandoned her body there. And his response, yo, get ready for this. He shrugs and says, she needed just to be put somewhere. Yep, that's what he said. She needed to be put somewhere. Like she was an old couch he was trying to get rid of. I can just imagine the detective's reactions, right? Like, did he really just say that? It's almost insulting the way he talks about her like she was a piece of furniture. He's not even trying to come up with a decent excuse. And when they push him on the lack of remorse, asking him if he feels guilty or even the slightest bit of sorry, he just looks at them and says, "Not really. She was there. I mean, talk about cold." The detectives must have been sitting there, looking at each other like, this guy has no soul. To him, Melody wasn't a person, wasn't a mother, wasn't a grandmother. She was just there. It's terrifying to think someone could have that level of detachment from reality, from basic human decency. And let's be honest, the detectives had to be biting their tongues here. They probably thinking, really, buddy, that's your defense? That she was just there? I can imagine the level of restraint it took not to call him out for the twisted monster he clearly is. But they stay professional. Keep pressing, looking for any other crack, that icy stone cold facade he's putting on. Now, the detectives keep pushing, hoping he'll slip up, give them even a hint of emotion. But Colby stays locked in his little world, emotionless and flat as he can be. By the end of it, he's practically a case study in the dark triad of personality traits, a walking textbook on psychopathy, narcissism, and the kind of arrogance that comes from having zero self-awareness. He doesn't give them anything, not an ounce of remorse, no flicker of guilt. If anything, he almost seems annoyed, like this interview is just one big inconvenience to him. And at this point, the detectives have everything they need. His words, his reactions, or lack thereof, are only solidifying what they already know, that they can practically see him digging his own grave with every word he says. It's like he thinks if he acts bored, they'll just call it a day and let him go. But let's be real. The only place Colby is going is behind bars. The whole interview is a chilling reminder of what complete detachment looks like. Colby Martin wasn't remorseful. He wasn't scared. He wasn't feeling any indifference to the situation. The kind of indifference that turns your stomach, that leaves you wondering how someone can lack even the most basic sense of humanity. So after all the evidence, the police interviews, the mountain of proof they have on him, it's time for the big moment, Colby's trial. You think by this point Colby might show a flicker of awareness that he's in serious trouble. I mean, he's about to stand in front of a jury that's got enough evidence to lock him away for life. But no, Colby walks into that courtroom looking as calm and detached as ever. He's got this expression like he's just waiting in the line at the DMV, like he's not even remotely aware of what he's done or the weight of what's about to happen. The courtroom is completely packed. Melody's family and friends are there, and people from her community who can barely hold back their anger and heartbreak. They're there to support Melody's memory, to make sure Colby knows exactly how many lives he shattered with his actions. It's intense. You can feel the tension in the air, like everyone's holding their breath, waiting for justice. And then there's Colby, just sitting there in his little chair, as if he's waiting for the judge to read off his library fines. It's completely infuriating. So the prosecution starts laying it all out. They've got the cell phone records, their surveillance footage, the physical evidence from his truck, and then they're going through it point by point, each piece of evidence painting a darker and darker picture of what happened. They described in painstaking detail what Colby did to Melody, every horrible act, every calculated move he made, and as they're going through it, they look over at Colby, probably hoping for some reaction, maybe a little regret, maybe a hint of humanity. But Colby? He's still sitting there with that blank stare, like he's listening to a weather report. It's like nothing's getting through to him. So the prosecution doesn't hold back. They bring witnesses to the stand, people who saw Melody on her last walk, people who'd seen Colby lurking around town, looking as off as ever. They even bring in the detectives who worked the case, who testify about how cold and emotionless he was during the investigation. They share details of his interrogation. Those chilling words he had said, I quote, "She needed to be put somewhere." And I can only imagine the jury's faces at this point. Like, they're probably sitting there in shock, thinking, did he actually just say that? It's so heartless. It almost doesn't seem real. Then the defense takes their turn, and let me tell you, they had their work cut out for them. I mean, how do you defend someone who's been this callous, this brazen? Their strategy is the classic "he didn't mean it" approach, trying to argue that maybe this was some kind of accident, that Colby wasn't in his right mind. They bring in a few character witnesses, people who knew him years ago, who try to paint a picture of Colby as this troubled soul, but let's be real, nobody in that room is buying it. It's hard to see him as a troubled soul when he's sitting there looking like he'd rather be anywhere else but here. And while the defense is doing their best they can to make him sound human, Colby is sitting there with his usual deadpan stare like he doesn't even care what happens. I mean, this is his life on the line, and he's just vacant. Not even a twitch. If he had an ounce of self-preservation, you'd think he'd try to look, I don't know, a little worried, a little remorseful, but nah. Colby Martin is sitting there like he's got better things to do. His face is practically begging the jury to lock him up. But then comes the most powerful part of the trial, the impact statements from Melody's family, her kids, her grandkids, and her friends. People who had loved her, who had changed forever by what she did. They talk about the pain he caused, about the hole he left in their lives. They share memories of Melody, how she had touched so many people, and how she was the light in their world. And the room is filled with grief and anger. People crying, people clenching their fists. It's heavy, and definitely everyone is feeling it, except, of course, Colby, who just stares straight ahead like he's mentally checked out of the whole entire thing. And when it's all said and done, the jury doesn't need much time whatsoever to deliberate. I mean, they've got the evidence, the testimonies, and they've seen firsthand that Colby has zero remorse. So they come back with a verdict, guilty. And in that moment, you'd expect some kind of reaction, right? Like maybe he'd finally realized the weight of his actions, the reality of spending the rest of his life behind bars. But Colby, of course, he's just sitting there, completely emotionless, as if they just told him he owes a parking ticket. So the judge comes in and he sentences to life. The courtroom erupts and it is just ballistic in there. Melody's family is holding each other, people are crying, and there's a wave of relief mixed with heartbreak. They just got justice for Melody, but nothing can bring her back. Colby is then led out of the courtroom, and I can only imagine the collective sigh of relief as he's taken away. It's like everyone in that room can finally start to heal, knowing he'll never hurt anyone else again. So, where's Colby now? After the trial and the judge rendered the verdict of life sentence, Colby's days of roaming free are over. He's now exactly where he belongs, behind bars, where he'll spend the rest of his life. No more freedom, no more wandering around town looking for his next victim. Colby is locked away, and with any luck, he's going to be spending a lot of time reflecting on the pain he caused. Though, knowing him, it's hard to say if he's even capable of that. But the bottom line, he's off the streets, and he'll never get another chance to hurt anyone again. For Melody's family and community, this doesn't erase the pain. Nothing ever really could. But knowing that Colby will never walk free again brings just some level of justice and some sense of closure. Melody's family can start to heal, even if they will always be a piece missing, a void of Colby's actions. They've made it clear they want to be remembered not for what happened to her, but for who she was. A warm, generous soul who left an impact on everyone she met. Well, everyone, this case is one of those that stay with you. Melody Rohrer didn't deserve what happened to her. She was a woman who gave so much to the people around her. A mother, a grandmother, a friend, a teacher. Her life was taken by someone who showed absolutely no respect for her humanity. Colby Martin is a reminder of just how dark people can become. How some can live among us without empathy or any conscience. But I'm telling her story. We remember Melody for the light she brought to the family, friends, and her community. People like her make the world a better place. And even though she's gone, her legacy lives on in the lives she touched. And as for Colby, he's just a footnote. a sad, twisted man who will spend the rest of his life in a cell where he belongs. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for taking the time to remember Melody Rohrer and to bear witness to her story. Cases like this are rough. They're important to remind us of how fragile life is and how much the people we love mean to us. If you take anything from this episode, let it be known to the ones you love to look out for each other and never forget the power of kindness. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you on the next episode of Dre's Crime Chronicles. God bless.